Good morning, everybody, and this is Auntie. And I know y'all not used to seeing me on a weekday coming out talking about a movie, but I have been meaning to do this video for about a week. Y'all, I almost skipped this movie, and if I had, it would have been one of the biggest mistakes that I've made in a long time. And I'm going to tell y'all why. Let's talk about the Odyssey, shall we? Oh, yes, we shall.
A sweet old auntie. Thank you, subscribers, to my nieces and nephews, and all of y'all who have been here through the long haul. Shall we get into it? Oh, yes, we shall. It's time for Auntie Advice. Sweet old. It's time for Auntie Advice. Oh, yeah. It's time for Auntie Advice.
Welcome back, everybody. I don't know why I'm so excited to talk about this movie. Y'all, when I tell you, I got to tell y'all about this movie because if it had not been for my daughter, I never would have gone. She kept saying, "Mom, you've got to see the Odyssey. Mom, I want to make reservations for us to see the Odyssey. Mom, you gonna go and see the Odyssey? Mom, did you look up the Odyssey? Mom, did you see the trailer on the Odyssey? Mom, when we going to see the Odyssey? Mom, I got my AC. What is it? AMC um movie pass. All I have to do is pay for your picture, because you a senior citizen. I'm gonna get the senior citizen price on it." And I'm like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. So I looked at the preview of it and I was like, you know what, this gives us an opportunity to spend time together. So I was like, okay, go ahead and make the reservations. So when she made the reservations, she asked me, what time you want to go? You want to go in the morning? You want to go in the evening? Where you want to go? I said, let's go to the first one. So she decided that we was going to go and see Dolby, go and see it in Dolby. I don't know what Dolby is. I'm old school. And so I'm like, okay, but honey, when I went into the Adobe and I realized that it was surround sound and all kinds of stuff was going on in the theater, I was like, oh my goodness, I don't know whether or not I'm gonna be able to do this. My reluctancy for going to see the movie is, first of all, it was 3 hours long, and I don't want to sit nowhere for 3 hours. But she kept saying, Mom, we got to go and see the Odyssey together. I want to experience this with you. And like I said, every single time she brought it up, I'd be like, girl, no, Pooh, it's 3 hours long. 3 hours. I had basically already convinced myself that there was no way I was going to enjoy sitting in this movie theater for 3 hours watching some Greek mythology. I remember thinking, how much can possibly happen in 3 hours? I had basically already made up my mind before she even brought the ticket. And she was like, Mom, you going to enjoy it. Mom, you're going to like it. So after a while, I was like, okay, stop pushing back. Just go ahead and go. Um, One of the things that she didn't try to do was convince me to go with a long speech, because she knows she can't do that. She was like, Mom, I think you're going to like it. So we get up, we get to the Adobe Theater out in Annapolis. I guess that was the one that was available for us that early in the morning. I don't know. Usually I like going to early morning shows if I'm gonna go and see a movie, because I don't like a crowd, right? There weren't people talking over each other, wasn't no long concession line. Matter of fact, you could just walk up and get your popcorn. And we didn't even buy any popcorn. We just found our seats. We got comfortable and waited for the lights to come on, child. And I looked over at my daughter and I was like, I hope this good. I hope this is good. And she just was like, Mom, relax, relax, Mom. But looking back at it now, I think that she already knew. Um, I was going to walk out that theater saying I was completely wrong. And let me tell you, I realize why people have been telling this story, y'all, for almost what, 3,000 years, I think. When I say that this movie is old, I mean it was old, old. They had a star-studded cast. Let me bring it up because it's going. I'm gonna tell y'all why I'm bringing this up. This is the cast, right, of the Odyssey. Matt Damon, Tim Holland, and Hathaway, honey, Lupita Nyong'o. I can't. Y'all, let me just tell you. Let me warn you. I'm gonna jack up some words, okay? I'm gonna jack up some words. I'm gonna mispronounce names, but you get it, okay? Let me bring them back up. So they had Robert Patterson, Charlize Theron, Benny Safdie. But the person that I was most surprised about was the comedian. I don't see him in here. Oh my goodness, I meant to put him in here. But this was the cast was phenomenal. At the end of the movie, I told my daughter, I said, "Why does the guy played Thelmarcus, Telemarcus, whatever, y'all? I told y'all I'm gonna jack up some names. He played the son of Odysseus. Child, when we left out, I was like, why does he look familiar to me? Hey, good morning. Good morning. Thank you, y'all. I was like, why does he look familiar? My daughter was like, Mom, he was Spider-Man. I was like, what? I know you lied. I knew I recognized him. His face was familiar, but I ain't into movies like that. Y'all know I don't even really cover them on my channel, but this one I had to do. So it was a star-studded cast. Like I said, I was just ready. They gave. I went back and looked at some history on it. This was written nearly 2,800 years ago by a Greek poet named Homer. And just think about that for 1 second. Countries have come and gone, empires have risen and they have fallen, and the world has changed in ways that Homer could never have imagined. And yet, here we are, me and my daughter, in 2026, sitting in a Dolby theater watching a story that has survived nearly 3 millennia, right? And I don't know about you, but that kind of made me a little curious. So I was like, okay, so they're gonna continue to make this over and over. Like, how many times can you make it over and over, over and over? But honey, Kristen Nolan answered that question for me almost immediately. So the movie opened up after the Trojan War, but before Odysseus ever begins his journey home. And we are reminded why people still talk about him today. So for 10 years, the Greeks fought the city of Troy. And so can you imagine spending 10 years fighting the same war? People were exhausted, families were destroyed, thousands of soldiers have died, and nothing the Greeks tried could break through the walls of Troy. So then the one man came up with an idea, not a bigger army, but a stronger weapon, an idea. So Odysseus suggested, right, building an enormous wooden horse. And it was beautiful the way that they had been built it. And I want to say too that none of this was in CGI. All of this was like live and in living color, which gave me a different perspective on the movie period, right? Because you don't really see that anymore in theaters. I think that's kind of why I get kind of a little bored with them. But anyway, I digress. I just wanted to bring that out. So Odysseus, right, suggests building an enormous wooden horse, making it look like a peace offering. But inside of it was Greek soldiers, and they were pretending that the Greek army had sailed away. Now, y'all already know where this is going. So the people of Troy wake up in the morning, see this beautiful wooden horse sitting outside of their city land downtown on the beach. And they think that they have won this war. So they have a little celebration. They throw open the gates that had stayed shut for what, 10 years, y'all? They drag, and I mean they heaving and hoeing and dragging this giant horse into the middle of the city, believing it's a trophy. And all I could think in my mind was, oh hell, something about to go down. Because of course we see all of these soldiers inside of this horse, and they throwing them back and forth. They falling all over the place. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this about to get good. Because we all know, basically, what they don't know is that these mofos are in this horse. So, like I said, inside of the horse are these Greek soldiers sitting in complete silence, hoping that nobody can even hear them breathe, let alone anything else. So that night, right, they erected it, they put it up, you know, they heaved and hold it, like I said. And so that night, while the city was celebrating, the soldiers popped up out that. They popped up out that horse. They opened the gates from the inside, and the rest of the crew of the army marched in straight into Troy. And y'all, when I tell you, just like that, the war was over, child. I leaned over to my daughter and I was like, oh my goodness, who thought of that? And she just smiled. And at that point, she knew, okay, this got my mama's attention. So while Troy finally defeated Odysseus, gathers his surviving men. Um, okay, you do? Fantastic, fantastic. So Odysseus and his surviving men load 12 ships with food, weapons, treasures, and supplies, and they point them towards home. But home isn't on the other side of the world. It's in Ithaca, y'all, where his wife Penelope and their son Telemachus, Macus. Let's just call him Tally. Shh. I ain't got time to be trying. I ain't got time. Okay. Tally have been waiting for them for these years. And the trip takes about 10 days. Instead, it took him 10 years. So I'm looking and saying, okay, a journey that should have taken him less than 2 week turns into an entire decade because he decided to go another way. And by the time he finally gets home, every ship is gone. Every soldier who left Troy with him is dead. His little boy is now a grown daggone man. His wife has spent 20 years wondering if she'll ever see her husband again. And at that moment, I was like, this is Greek mythology. So I started thinking, how in the world, right, did 10 days turn into 10 years? And that's when I realized, right, this wasn't a story about monsters like I thought it was going to be. It was a story about everything that can go wrong between where you currently are and where you're trying to be in your life. I was able to, gain some clarity on what I was watching. So it's important that I talk about, some of the things, right? I wrote some notes. So the first stop on the journey is a cave. The minute those men walked into that cage, I started talking to the screen. Don't go in there. And I don't know why people in movies are always walking into caves that don't belong to them. Child, leave the cheese where it is. Leave the sheep where they are. Go back to the boat. But no. My daughter looked at me, right, and started like, she had like this little grin on her face because she knew exactly what was going to happen. Child, I didn't. I just knew that they didn't need to go up in this cave. And you know, Odysseus was like, where there's a sheep, there's a flock. So I'm like, okay, so where's the flock at? Why is this one sheep by itself? You need to roll, you need to roll the hell out of there, right? But no, they go in there and everything, and they think that they're going to, barter with this person about their sheep and stuff, child. Oh no. It was this daggone big old guard. This big, it had one. Oh my God, the thing was gross, and I think it was called Polly something. Child, his name gonna be Polly. He was a giant cyclop, right, with one eye and an appetite for eating people. When he came in there and they saw this big old thing, child, at first they were seeing sunlight next to he took a big old rock and closed down the whole entire cave. And I was like, oh my God, it's about to be on and popping. He closed the whole entire entrance and they was trapped. And child, when he took and picked up two men and ate them, the other guys was scattering back. They was trying not to get eaten. I mean, like their eyes they couldn't believe their eyes, right? So he picked up the two men, he ate them, he pulled and went to sleep. Child, when I tell you that I spent the majority of the movie like this, looking through my shirt. And my daughter was like, Mom, look. And I'm looking. I see it. I'm balled up. Now, we're in Adobe Theater, so it felt like the chairs was rumbling, the sound was like like thundering. And I'm like, why would she bring me to Adobe Theater when stuff is going on in the chairs? Y'all, I'm telling you, I felt like I was feeling a cool breeze on me and everything. I felt like I was in the cave with them. But anyway, I digress. Let me continue on. So I am like seriously under my shirt. I'm screaming, I'm jumping, and I may have said a couple of words that wasn't appropriate for the theater at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay. Some colorful language. And everybody else in there was reacting. So I ain't feel bad. I think I may have been the only one under my shirt. But at that point, I didn't even care. Okay. I'll be your little punk. I could hear people around me gasping for air, child, but here's what fascinated me. So Odysseus, he never panicked. He knew that he couldn't beat the Cyclops in the fight. So he basically outsmarted him. He offered him some wine, waited till he fell asleep, and blinded him with a burning wooden stake, like the guys did. And they got about that joint. But before then, they got up underneath some he had the sheet. And he was like, okay, we got to get up out of this camp. And so they put like straw and stuff like that on their backs. But when I was looking at some of the research, it said that they kind of like tied themselves up underneath the sheet, the sheet. And so since his eye was jacked up, he was just feeling right. So the sheep were running out, and they was up underneath him, right. So I was like, okay. So the Cyclops, he knew that the men were still trapped in the cave. So the next morning, he stood at the entrance, right, like I said, and was filling the sheep. And then Odysseus did something that I never would have thought of. He tied his men under him, right? So those sheep walked out of the cave carrying all the soldiers underneath them. And I was like, okay, now y'all, if y'all know I got a big mouth, eventually it's going to get you in trouble. And that's exactly what happened to Odysseus, right? Because after pulling off one of the smartest escapes, um, all he had to do was get in the ship and sail his ass away. He had outsmarted the Cyclops. Every one of his men had escaped that cave alive, except for the ones that got eaten, and they were safe. But sometimes some people just got to have the last word and they got to show off. So as the ship was pulling further away from the shore, Odysseus couldn't help himself but to blast out, okay? And he shouted across the water, telling the Cyclops exactly who had defeated him. So, in other words, he wanted the giant to know whose name, was on this thing, right? But baby, when Odysseus didn't realize that Polly thing wasn't just a giant, he was the son of somebody named Poseidon, the god of the sea. That blind Cyclops fell to his knees and begged his father to make sure Odysseus never made it home. Child, when I tell you, watching that scene, I could not help but think how many times one moment of pride has changed the whole directory of somebody's life. Sometimes it's not, the big mistakes that hurt us the most. Sometimes it's one sentence, one decision, one moment where we just couldn't leave well enough alone. Shut the up. That scene had me thinking about real life just as much as the movie itself. Learn how to stand down and shut up. But not long after that, right, another opportunity to get home, right, appeared. And the God of the Wind, child, let me spell, Elusus, listens to everything Odysseus had been through and decided that he wanted to help him. So he gave him a strange leather bag tied with a silver cord. Inside the bag were all of the dangerous winds that could blow the ship off course. And so one gentle wind is left free to carry them toward Ithaca. And so for 9 straight days, everything was going exactly the way it should. The ship sailed smoothly. The weather is perfect. Then on the 10th day, they finally see Ithaca in the distance and can actually see some smoke raising from the homes. So they knew they was close to home. But I was like, okay, ain't no way in the world. This is 3 hours and it looked like we probably like 45 minutes in. That ain't something going down, because what we going to do for the rest of the 2 hours and 15 minutes? Child, I was like, oh my God. So Odysseus, exhausted from everything he had been through, right? Finally goes to sleep. Child, while he's sleeping, his own men began whispering to each other. Then they've been staring at that daggone bag, convincing themselves that it was filled with gold, and that Odysseus, and I know I'm probably jacking up his name, y'all bear with me, he had been hiding it from them. Y'all look, isn't it amazing what suspicion can do when you ain't got the right crew around you, when you don't trust? How many times have y'all had the wrong crew around you? You telling them as much as you can tell them, right? But they get together in they get together in their little cahoots against you and thinking that you trying to hide some information. Ain't nobody know what was inside that bag. They just assumed that he was hiding something from them, some money. For what? So while the captain, Odysseus is asleep, They untie the cord. The moment that the bag opens, every violent wind trapped inside explodes back into the world. The ships are thrown across the sea, away from Ithaca, away from the home, away from everything that they have fought to reach. And I was sitting there like, what in the hell just happened? What just happened? Now I'm gonna tell you with Greek mythology, I don't know a lot, right? I don't remember it from school. But child, I was intrigued. Curiosity and greed destroyed what was literally right in front of them home. Have you ever been so close to something you prayed for only to watch it disappear because of one bad decision that you made? That's exactly what happened to these mofos. So by now I wasn't just watching right this movie from a fantasy perspective. I was seeing lessons after lessons about life hidden inside this ancient story. And my daughter was trying to tell me about, the Greek gods and Greek mythology and treat everybody, because it was a theme across, treat everybody as if you're entertaining a god. And so, I'm trying to collect all of this data, right? Because my daughter know the stuff like backwards and forwards. And I'm like, oh, okay. I don't remember it being taught in school. It probably was, but it was a lot of life lessons, right? You when you entertaining a stranger, you never know if you're entertaining a god. And I left with that. So eventually, the ships arrived at a island in Turkey, whatever. And honestly, after everything they had been through, I thought these men deserved, like, a little bit of peace or rest or whatever. And so they welcomed them with warm food, wine, and hospitality. And this woman that they meet, right, she doesn't come across as threatening. In fact, she seems almost comforting. And I was like, nah. Because, honey, everything changed. One by one, the soldiers started transforming into pigs, y'all. When I tell y'all people started gagging, I'm not exaggerating. You could hear not one person, several people. I looked around the theater, honey, because he was like, feed my men, and she told them, to put their armor out on this, on the lawn. And child was already armor out there, but because they was so starving, child, they went and started eating. They was eating like pigs, and child, they had the daggone lady sat there with the daggone man face and transferred them into pigs. I mean, the nastiest thing you've ever seen. And I looked around the theater because I couldn't believe what was happening. And I just wanted to see people's reaction. And my daughter looked at me and I looked at her, and neither one of us said nothing. Because at the end of the day, we didn't have to. The expressions was on our faces, and and that said everything, child. When I tell you that I'm looking at my, I'm looking at my daughter from what now, from what I learned is that they had given her some clay or some gooey stuff or something, because like I said earlier, it wasn't CGI, so it was actually happening. But they had given her like some mo. Oh my God! If y'all saw it, well, how did y'all react to that, child? Let me tell y'all, just the shock and horror in the theater said everything. So I think that what I think that what it wasn't just the transformation that bothered me, right? It was watching those men realize that they were losing themselves. You could see the fear in their eyes before they completely changed. And that scene stayed with me because it wasn't simply about the magic that the woman had, it was about losing their identity. And Odysseus, once again, right, proves why people had admired him for thousands of years, because before confronting the woman, he's given a magical herb that protects him from her spells. So instead of becoming another victim, he forces her to change every one of the men back into human beings. And I did like that, right? So once the danger passes, the woman doesn't remain an enemy, she becomes an ally, and she helps them to heal, and she gives them like a safe place to rest and all of that. And of course she's giving him, other insight on things that are going to be happening and stuff like that. And they know that this woman has given him, some information and stuff, because basically she was a witch. And they stayed on that daggone place with her for a year. Time for me wasn't recognized, like how many times he stayed places and stuff like that. It didn't dawn on me while I was in the movie. It was after the fact that when me and my daughter started talking that I realized that he was here year, he was there year. I just was like, okay. And I also thought that it was interesting that not every conflict has to end with someone being destroyed. Sometimes understanding the purpose of a thing changes. So then my daughter leaned over and said something that made me smile. She was like, Mom, it's about to get good. And I was like, oh, for real? She was like, yeah. Y'all, by this time, I was already hooked. Still looking through my shirt. Don't get it twisted, but I'm hooked. So I was like, okay, what else is getting ready to happen to Odysseus? Is this mofo? So then we see that Odysseus, right, has to go to this other island. And it's, it isn't a battle. He has to journey to the land of the dead. Y'all, when I tell you that I was watching that completely through my shirt, are these people coming up out the sand like that? And I'm under my shirt and I'm watching these dead people come and talk to him. And my daughter sitting up there to my mom, pay attention, pay attention. I was like, oh my, okay, what else gonna happen? Y'all, when I tell you that nothing prepared me for a lot of this scene, including this one. So here's my thought. Christopher Nolan did not make the underworld look like a haunted house or anything, or a place filled with monsters jumping out from behind rocks like you would probably expect. He made it feel empty, and it just was cold and silent. It was almost as though the world itself has stopped. And so when Odysseus walks into this dark, lifeless place carrying the weight of everything he had already survived, he digs a pit in the ground and pours the blood of a sacrifice into it. And then something happened that just made me, just was like, okay, it's just time to go. That's when all the dead people start coming. Child, they was, when they start rising about that saying, I was like, no. I have seen some horror movies my entire life, right? But there was something about the silence of that scene that made it even more unsettling in my spirit. And nobody in the theater, right, was saying anything. It wasn't no, the scene didn't make you jump. It didn't make me raise my shirt up to my head. It was like all of us just sat there watching these figures coming up out of from the darkness, and I found myself totally engrossed in it without even realizing. And then Odysseus finally meets the man he's been sent to find, and that's this guy named Tyrus. Now, my daughter had to tell me who this guy was because I don't remember. I don't remember this Greek stuff. She whispered just enough so I could understand why this meeting was so important. And I appreciated that because it helped me enjoy the story instead of like feeling lost and confused. She told me that Thais doesn't tell Odysseus what he wants to hear. He tells him what he needed to hear. And he warns him that the hardest part of this journey is still ahead. And then he tells him there are more dangers awaiting, more temptations to resist, and more choices that will determine whether he ever sees his family again. And so I was like, okay, so he gonna fight some more monsters. What's going on? But I found that the rest of it was just much more deeper because it was basically about whether or not he could defeat himself. Can he control his pride and his arrogance? Can he stay disciplined so he doesn't lose any more life? Because it was just soldiers dying left and right. I mean, they started off with what, 3 boats, y'all? Anyway, I just was like, this has got to be a lot when all the choices and the decisions, right, are on you. And none of them was easy for him to make. And there came a moment, right, that kind of broke my heart because out of all the spirits gathering around him, Odysseus suddenly sees someone he never expected, and it was his mother. And she hadn't died in the battle. She hadn't died because of some monster. She had died waiting for him to come home. So Odysseus reached out to hug her only to have his arms pass right through her. It was one of the saddest moments in the entire movie. And nothing, because he tried like what, 3 times, y'all? And I can't imagine seeing my mom or my dad, both of who I've not seen since 1989, only to realize that I still can't ever hold them again. And I was like, wow, that part of it didn't need any explosions. It simply needed us. It When Odysseus finally realized, right, the underworld, I thought maybe, just maybe, the worst was behind him. But child, the next one was Sirens. And when I tell y'all that this gave me the heebie jeebies, this gave me the heebie jeebies. Now, my daughter had mentioned about the sirens, but I never really understood why they were so dangerous and until I watched the movie, right? Because at this point, y'all, I'm totally into this. I'm part of the cast at this. I'm on the boat with them. I mean, I'm going through the trials. Did y'all feel like that? I felt like, let's get on the boat. Let's get the around here. Let's get like I'm in the boat. And I don't know if it made y'all feel like that, but that's how it made me feel. Let's get on the boat. Let's get the up out of here. Dead people coming about the ground. I like it was oh my God, it was a lot going on. The sirens were like beautiful women singing songs. They represented this like temptation. They promised everything your heart wanted to hear, and if you follow them, they would lead straight to the destruction. So Odysseus wanted to hear their voices, but he also knew he couldn't trust them. And so before they reached the island, he ordered his men to melt wax and fill their ears so they couldn't hear the singing. And then he told them to tie him up to the boat, tightly to the mast of the ship, and in no way take him off of there, no matter how much he screamed and begged to get off this, right? Don't take me off, don't untie me. Child, as the ship drifted closer, and the singing began, and then screaming, and then demanding to be released. He pulled against those ropes with everything he had. The crew was just rush, 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 and they was letting us hear the songs, and I was like, "What the is going on?" And all they kept doing was rowing, rowing. One of the dudes jumped up off there. I guess he must have took his earplugs out or could hear through the wax. I don't know. His ass jumped out the out the ship, and I was like, ah! And the singing faded, and they passed. And because his men obeyed the instruction he gave them before temptation arrived, instead of listening to him during temptation, he saved his life. And I was looking at my daughter like, what are we watching? If you think about, right, the sirens man means Odysseus is finally getting a break. Child, it just was one trial and tribulation after another. And I so related that to my life. Let me get off that. I so related that to my life because in my walk, um as a Christian, right? Trying to be a Christian woman, child, trying. I've learned over my years that there is one temptation after another temptation, another test, after another test, after another test. And it just really made me think that, you know what, you go through these tests, you go through these things, right? And at the end, you win. If you make the right decisions, you'll win. If you make the wrong decisions, you can overcome that and learn from it. So it really was applicable, right, to my life. How do I treat people, strangers that I see on the street? Like, let me go back. Let me, because I ain't come out here to preach. His ship now had to sail through this narrow passage, and it had dangers on both sides. One side was a silica, right? A cycler, six, whatever, Scylla. That's what it was. Y'all go ahead and pronounce it. And it was this six-headed monster perched high on the cliffs. On the other side was a massive whirlpool, right? And this was powerful enough to swallow an entire ship. So either way, there's gonna be loss. Pick the Odysseus had to pick the one that would be less loss. He already knew from the lady that if they took the whirlpool, they was gonna be dead. But he alone knew that there was this six-headed monster waiting to take his men. So at the end of the day, he had to make a decision. So the lady had already warned him what he needed to do: sail closer to this monster. And basically, as horrible as that sounds, losing a few men was better than losing everybody. And I can't even imagine carrying that responsibility of making a decision like that. So basically, as a leader, he knew people were going to die no matter which one he chose. And that's a heavy, heavy weight. So he doesn't even tell his men the entire truth because he knows if they panic, everybody aboard the ship. Y'all, that's my dog. I don't know what's going on with her, but you okay? He knew everybody aboard the ship could be lost. So as they enter right into this little narrow passageway, everything gets tense, right? and the rowers are doing everything they can to push the ship forward, right, to make sure that they don't go down this whirlpool. And without warning, child, this daggone thing starts attacking. It's got a long neck. It came crashing down from the cliff, snatching the soldier straight up off the deck before anybody could react. And I shall remember. Okay. I'm like, oh my God, it's one thing after another. I was watching Odysseus, right? And I knew that he knew exactly what was happening. But he knew he couldn't save him and he needed to make a sacrifice. And he kept sailing. That scene reminded me that leadership isn't always about making good choices, right? Sometimes leadership in your life means choosing between two heartbreaking outcomes and carrying out the weight of that decision. And sometimes that decision may last you forever. But I don't think enough movies show that side of leadership. But this one definitely opened up my eyes to that. So after surviving that, you would think that everybody would listen to him, but they didn't. The crew lands on this island, right, that belongs to Helios, the sun god. Before they even set foot on the shore, Odysseus repeats the warning he had already received from the little lady. Do not touch the cattle. Don't eat the sacred cattle. Now, mind you, they done been through all this tragedy. They hungry-ish. They hungry. Now, he's saying to them, no matter how hungry you become, no matter how desperate you become, leave the animals alone. Don't eat them. And all the men agree. Everybody in unison agrees. But when the weather traps them there for days, their food begins to disappear, right? And so everybody hungry as hell. And when you get desperate and you hungry, you gonna make it do what it gotta do. You gonna forget all about the little promise that you made. And one night while Odysseus was asleep, the men do exactly what they promised that they wouldn't do. Child, they killed that sacred cattle. And when Odysseus woke up and smelled the meat cooking, child, downtown to the fire, he already know what's going to happen. He already know what's about to happen. Because the punishment came very quickly. Zeus, the god. Now, my daughter was trying to tell me about Zeus and Zeus's law and all of that. I caught a little bit of it, but like I said, y'all can tell by the way that I'm not pronouncing these words correctly, but getting my story out there anyway. Zeus sent a lightning bolt crashing into the ship, blowing it apart in an instant. The men who survived the Cyclops, they went through the cirque and it survived the sirens and the little thing that was sitting up on the mountain in the rocks. All perished. Only Odysseus survived, and he's left floating alone on a single piece of broken wood. And you could feel, right, the effects of that on the audience. Um, the sea eventually carries Odysseus to this island of Cyclops, Caleb, whatever, Calypso, and he was with this woman, right? She rescues him, she cares for him, and offers him, refuge and stuff like that. She offers him immortality, no more storms, no more monsters, no more pain. Stay here forever and you'll never have to suffer again. But he wanted to get home. And so while she was feeding him this stuff, he was like, I want to get home. Downtown back at the daggone castle, they got all these men who allegedly are suitors because his wife is, got the son. They ain't respect the son. They had all these people up in there grubbing and eating their food because they wanted her to make a decision on who she was going to marry. And back in the day, under Zeus's law, you took care of these people until she made a decision about who was going to be her next king. And she didn't want to be with anybody else. She, had like a little, they had like a little, I don't know what it was, but they had like this little piece that she had given him. And it was like I don't know what it was. Y'all tell me down in the chat, was it a woman? I don't know what it was. But she had all these suitors in there, and they were just eating up their stuff, just eating up this stuff, ruining the castle. And she was holding out. She was like, I want my man to come home. The son, wanted to meet his dad, right? And they made fun of him because he didn't. And then we had the blind man. I can't think of what his name was, but he's a comedian, and I think that shocked me more than anybody else was seeing him. He had a dog that was, Odysseus had a dog that was hooked up to him, and the dog, was living all them years that he was gone, and they would, mistreat both the dog and the blind man. Y'all tell me what the blind man name is downtown in the bottom. I don't remember. But anyway, he wanted to get home, but she was giving him this flower. So he was with her, I think, what y'all, 7 years? Really basically not giving up hope to go home. He wanted to go back to Ithaca. So the gods finally decide that Odysseus has suffered enough. So this lady Athena, who has watched him throughout much of his journey, goes before Zeus and pleads his case. She reminds the king of the gods that this man has endured more than anyone she have endured, and Zeus finally agrees and orders Cyclops right to let him go. Now, I have to tell you that I found myself smiling during this part because I knew that Odysseus was finally getting another chance. And even though the woman didn't want him to leave, she has no choice but to do it, right? So she helps him to build this craft and gather some supplies for his journey and watches him sail away. And I was like, okay, about time, because he need to go up in there and whoop some people's asses, it's okay, for tearing his stuff up. But another god is still furious. So the moment that Odysseus gets back on the open sea, this other god sends another violent storm crashing down on him. The waves destroy the raft, and once again, he finds his daggone self fighting for his life in the middle of the ocean. But at this point, I actually was like, okay, so what else going to happen? What more can happen to the daggone man, right? And I was like, Lord Jesus, get the man. Is the man getting home and all? What else gonna happen to him? Who else he gonna see? He done lost everybody. Meanwhile, his wife downtown at the castle about to try to make a decision. Eventually, he gets there. He washes up on the shore, where a little young princess discovers him laying on the beach. She doesn't know who he is. She just simply sees a man in need, and she helps him. She brings him to her father's palace, where for the first time Odysseus tells someone the entire story, right, of everything that he's been through. And so as I watched him, tell his story, I realized I'd almost forgotten how much he really did survive. So when Odysseus finally reaches Ithaca, I was ready for the reunion. I've been waiting this since the very beginning. Is he getting home? So now you didn't answer that question. He getting home, but are they gonna remember him? When he got home, he ain't running his wife. He knew he had to come in there on the slow boat. He knew that he had to act like he wasn't who he was. So Athena meets him before he reaches his palace and warns him that everything has changed. And while he's been gone, these mofos, over 100 mofos, have taken over his home. They've eaten his food. They've spent all of his money, insulted his son, and pressured Penelope to marry one of them because they are absolutely convinced that after all this time, Odysseus is dead to the grave, dead to the bed. But instead of charging into the palace with his sword, he disguised himself as an old beggar. And I was like, it's, it's about to be on and stop popping. It's about to be on and shall pop it. Because after everything he done went through, he has sharpened his skill to have patience and not to react on his impulses. And how many of us can say that about our lives? After all the stuff that we went through in our lives and we've been through in our lives, I've been here over 60 years. You learn. I'm going to be a turtle, not a rabbit. Mm-hmm. You ain't going to see me coming, but you're going to see me leaving. Child, he quietly walked through his own home, looking at all these mofos who had no idea that he was the true king and he was standing right in front of them. I found myself thinking what it must feel like to walk through your own house, see it in total disrepair, and they treat you like a stranger on the street. And then, honey, Argos, out of every battle, every all these monsters, every visual effect, it was his old dog that nearly brought me to tears because they had thrown the dog out of the castle. The dog was just laying there, and nobody recognizes Odysseus right, but that dog acknowledged him, had a little quick little talk to Jesus about it, and next thing you know, he was gone. That dog waited 20 years. He lifted up his head, looked at his master one last time, wagged his tail, and quietly dies. And when I tell you my shirt went up, I was about in tears. But that's when the blind man knew. He knew what was going on. Job was done. I have my two dogs. I love my two dogs. I lost Boo Boo. Y'all went through the passing of Boo Boo with me years ago. I will never forget Boo Boo. Never. But Argos knew exactly who he was. And after waiting faithfully for nearly 2 decades, being disrespected, he could finally rest because he knew that Odysseus was home. Sometimes people who are loyal, they just simply wait. Meanwhile, child Penelope is facing the decision that she has avoided for years. The pressure from the suitors have become overwhelming. So she announces one final contest. Whoever can string Odysseus' great bow will become her husband. And honey, he had this bow that could nobody string but him. And honey, she held a nice little gala. One suitor stepped forward, One by one, ain't what none of them able to do it. They couldn't even bend the bow. The old little bagger asked if he could try, and they Kiki and the Kaka. This mofo ain't gonna be. He ain't gonna be able to do nothing. Yeah, this old clown. He. But honey, what they didn't realize was sometimes God will put you in disguise. You know, this a preach. But anyway, this a preach. To them, he was just a beggar. How many times have y'all in your life been underestimated? Underestimated about the royalty that's really in you. I know I have been and still am. But yet I rise. Anyway, that's for another day. Because what they didn't realize was he wasn't just a beggar. This was the man who carried that bow for years. And without struggling, Odysseus picked it up, strung it in one small motion, and fired that arrow through them daggone things that they had up there. They didn't even realize what was happening. Child, after he did that, they knew, she knew automatically, that's my boo. My boo! That's my boo! He throws off his disguise, honey, and everybody in the room is shocked and they like this mofo going down. This is the man that they mocked, the man that they ignored, the man they believed was powerless. But honey, he came up in there, he was the king and he was taking his throne. Child, when I tell you that the battle that followed was so exciting and thrilling. The son was fighting because they just thought he was a little punk. But he got his burns. He did what he did. And I was on the edge of my seat. It was so I'm getting chill bombs. It was so exciting, right? Because we anticipated and was waiting for him to come home. Every freaking storm, every monster, every temptation, every failure, every sacrifice, every heartbreak, everything led to this moment. He wasn't just fighting for revenge at that point. He was fighting for his family. He was fighting for his home. He was fighting for the life that he felt had been stolen from him. That's why every battle meant something. When the writer Christopher Nolan, right, gave us one final moment, this one final moment, y'all, for me, it was even more powerful than the battle itself. Penelope still wasn't completely convinced, not because she didn't love her husband, but because 20 years make people change. So she quietly tells one of the servants to move their marriage bed. Odysseus immediately reacts. He says that's impossible. No one can move that bed because he built it himself from a living olive tree whose roots still grew beneath the house. Only Odysseus could know that. She understood that only my husband would understand why that bed could never be moved. And that's when Penelope finally knows. My man is home. My man, my man, my man. It wasn't because she recognized his face. She recognized his heart. And I thought that was just beautiful. So, y'all, when I tell you when the credits started rolling, I ain't jump up out the seat or run to the parking lot. I just sat there with me and my daughter. And for a long time, I ain't say nothing. My daughter looked at me with the little smug smile on her face because I think she already knew exactly what was happening and what I was thinking. She had been right all along. I said, this was really, really good, Pooh. She started reminding me of some of the scenes we had watched because, we was riding in her car and she was pointing out little details I had missed. We talked about, the Cyclops. We talked about the other stuff. We talked about sirens, the underworld, the Argos, and she explained some things that connected back to the original story. And the more we talked, the more I appreciated what I had just experienced. And when I walked out of that theater, I had an aha moment. I had spent, contrary to what I thought, 3 hours disconnected from the world. Not one time did I check my phone. I didn't think about work. I didn't think about what I needed to get home. For 3 hours, I allowed myself to be immersed in this world. And honestly, for me, y'all know that's becoming harder and harder to do. Because what I realized is that movies don't always do that anymore. They may entertain you in a couple of hours. You may walk out of there saying, God, I wish I hadn't came and whatever. But this movie was different because it just wasn't one of those movies. It was a movie that I kept thinking about all the way home. And I kept replaying different scenes in my mind, the Trojan horse, and all the other things that happened. The unbelievable escape from that Cyclops with them sheep, the audience gagging when those men transformed into pigs, the beauty and horror at the same time of the Black Sands, the songs of the sirens. The thing that stayed with me the most wasn't everything that happened. It was that I trusted my daughter. It was spending time with her, seeing a really good story. I love the fact that my daughter recommended this movie to me. So the next time when somebody asks me, should I go or do I want to go, especially her, I'm going to smile and be like, yeah, let's go. Now there is a another movie, right, that she wants me to watch, and it is it on Peacock, called Obsessed. Is that the name of it, y'all? I agree with you. I agree with you. I was thoroughly impressed that it was a 3 hour long movie and I spent 0 minutes bored. Absolutely love Michelle. The blind man was called, okay, don't, okay, I ain't gonna ask you how to pronounce it because you see I jacked up plenty of stuff. Thank you, boo. I really enjoyed the film, although they missed out so much. I wish they made it two parts because what we got was done so well. And see, I didn't know anything like that. I just know that I absolutely loved it. TT said, I watched a version of this in high school. I'm definitely going to watch this one because of you. Oh, thank you, TT. That's what I was hoping, that one person would love it. Christine said that scene looked crazy, and I can't believe it was CG. I think that it wasn't CG. I think you're talking about um the pigs. So that's why I titled this video the way that I did. I almost skipped the Odyssey. And if I had, it would have been one of the biggest mistakes that I would have made. Y'all, that's my review on this. Yes, I jacked up names. Yeah, that's just me. That's how I do. If you get past it, you'll understand that this was a fantastic movie. Come back after you watch it. Let me know what you think about it. If you've already watched it, let me know that too. Tell me what you thought about this movie. And until we meet again, y'all be safe out there in those streets and in the water. If you like what you hear here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and join the family. I love y'all. Bye.